Mr. Ambassador, thanks for being with us here on the Hill. Appreciate it. I could spend the whole day, the whole show on the excerpts from this book, but let's start here with Russia. Do you believe the Biden administration had it right, that at one point there was a 50% chance that Russia would engage in nuclear war?
Well, of course, it depends on what information they had and how good it really was. But I will say this. I think ever since February of 2022, the White House has been scared of its shadow when it comes to what Russia was doing and what its capabilities were in Ukraine. I don't really think the potential use of a nuclear weapon ever came close to 50-50. I do think there are circumstances where the Kremlin would use a tactical nuclear weapon in Ukraine. I don't think those circumstances have yet been approached, and I don't think in the fall of 22 they were approached. So I think it's part of the White House problem is that they're so deterred by the threat of a wider war. They're obsessed by it, whether it's conventional or nuclear, that they overstate the risk. I'm not saying you should minimize the risk, but I think you're trying to be accurate, and when you overstate the risk, you're giving Vladimir Putin a freebie.
There's another fascinating piece from the story, excerpts from the book, in which Lloyd Austins, the defense secretary, told his counterpart from Russia, if you do this, meaning engaging in nuclear war, all constraints would be off. And the Russian counterpart responded by saying, I don't take lightly to threats. And here was Lloyd Austins' response. He said, quote, I am the leader of the most powerful military in the history of the world. I don't make threats. Was this handled properly?
Well, it's a great line. He's not the head of the most powerful military in history. The president is, but Secretary of Defense is not a bad place to be from. And I think it's an indication why communications, either direct military to military, mil-mil as they say, or from the civilian heads of defense agencies can play an important role in communications between countries. My experience has been that certainly our top military officers always behave very professionally, and they say it unvarnished, and I think that kind of communication can be helpful. So I give Austin kudos on the substance. I just quarrel about who the commander-in-chief is.
All right. By the way, I should note, we reached out to the Pentagon today about that quote. They didn't confirm it directly, though, of course, they did not deny that the phone call took place. They provided a readout, basically an acknowledgement that the call happened at the time. What about this idea, Ambassador Bolton, that there was a human source inside the Kremlin, which was why the administration was so sure of what was coming? Do you believe it? And what do you think Vladimir Putin is thinking tonight?
Well, I don't want to say too much about it. This was obviously, I was not in the government, so it's not like I'm privy to information, but it would be an extraordinary achievement if it were true. And I think you'd have to look long and hard whether it was through a counterintelligence perspective to try and get a better sense of whether it was real or not. You know, who was this person? Who was he speaking to? When was he speaking? What was the context? Did they have an intent that information get to us that may not be accurate? 1,000 questions about this, and history will have to tell us. I don't think we're going to learn anytime soon.
The Trump campaign responded to this, and here's what their spokesperson said, responded to the book, or at least the article, again, which has excerpts of the book. Bob Woodward, of course, noted famed author. They said, quote, none of these made-up stories by Bob Woodward are true and are the work of a truly demented and deranged man who suffers from a debilitating case of Trump derangement syndrome. What do you make of the statement tonight, Mr. Ambassador, from the Trump campaign as it relates to Bob Woodward's reporting and what we know of it?
Well, it's just as juvenile as most statements from the Trump campaign. I will say, if you look back on Woodward's book about Bob Casey and the Iran-Contra affair, he also quotes Casey on his deathbed, which most people believe is a conversation that never happened.
John Bolton, former ambassador, and of course, former national security advisor in the Trump administration. We got to leave it there. Thank you, sir. Appreciate you being with us here on the Hill.
Thanks for having me.
You got it. Thank you for watching, and make sure you go to joinnn.com to find NewsNation on your television provider. And don't forget to click the red subscribe button below to get more of NewsNation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.